right? And let me share the screen. Okay, so what is the answer? I have one data file and one NDF file, one MDF file and one NDF file. When I'm trying to create any new object, in which data file it is going to be created?
MDF.
By default,
MDF.
right? So any other answers? Why MDF?
Because you have marked it as a default.
Okay, so here you can see that option, default option. Default means whenever you're trying to create any objects and all, first it will try to create in the default files. Okay, what is the default file? Your MDF file is the default file. Of course, your primary file group is your default file group. So what are the files are there in the file primary file group? Imagine three files are there in the primary file group. Okay, so first it is trying to create on file 1. If there is no free space on the file 1, it will try to create on file 2. If there is no free space on file 2 also, it will try to create on file 3, and all like that it is going to differentiate and it is going to create the space. So how can you identify? By using this, I don't want to create any new objects on the file 1. I want to create new objects and all in my new file group. So what and all files are there in the new file group? So what file is there in my new file group? A second MDF file is there. I just added an NDF file, right? An NDF file is there. So if I just click default option here and if I click OK, now if you are trying to create any new tables, those tables will not be created in the primary file group files. So those tables will be created in your sales underscore 2 file. Why? Because you just selected as a default option fg1 as a default option. So what and all files are there in the fg1? So SQL Server will try to create objects in that files that belongs to fg1, right? So the concept is you can create multiple file groups by using just clicking in this file group section. You can add as many as file groups. How many file groups you can add? How many file groups you can create? Can anyone tell me? So whenever I asked how many the SQL Server, okay, remember one thing, there is a magic number. So we have already discussed what is that magic number. Okay, so
32762.
whenever I asked how many databases we can create, 32,767, of course, based on the system databases. How many file groups we can create? 32,767 file groups. How many files we can create? 32,767 files. How many logins we can create? 32,767 logins. How many users we can create? 32,767. So try to, like, whenever I asked how many, okay, the answer is mostly in most of the instances that will be 32,767. Okay, so I can create 32,767 file groups per database. 32,767 file groups per database. Okay, so if I ask you how many files I can create, how many files I can create in a SQL server, or else how many files I can create in a database?
32,767.
32,767. So if I ask you how many files I can create per database, that is 32,767 files per file group.
And we have
32,767 files per file group. Okay, how many files we can create per database?
32,767 into
That's it.
32,767.
Okay, so 32,767 into 32,767. Imagine, you can't imagine the number also. That many files we can create per database. Imagine how many files we can create per instance. Okay, so like this you cannot even imagine also. Okay, the number, that much long number is there. So usually how many file groups you can create per database? 32,767 file groups you can create. How to create a file group? Simply go to the, even after creating the database also you can create file groups. Simply just go to the properties. Okay, just go to the properties of any database, and there you can find file groups page. Okay, if you want to add any new file groups and all, you can simply add new file groups by just going to the file groups page and all. Okay, here you can see, right, file groups page is there, right? So here you can add how many files you want. You can simply add what is the default file group in the SQL server, sorry, in the database. Primary is the default file group, right? So if I ask you how many file groups we can create, actually we can create 32,766 primary file group. By default it will come, right? So database will support 32,767 file groups, but of course one file group will come, primary file group will come automatically with the database. So you can create 32,767 minus 1, 32,766 file groups. Clear? Any issues, any doubts till now, Andy? I know.
Shanmukh, hi Ishan here. I have a
Yeah, sure.
question.
Yeah.
Uh, like we have a primary file group and we create other prime file groups.
Okay.
So now if we are creating any table,
Okay.
so uh, if the this file group will be other than primary, then it will have a extension of .ndf,
Yes.
and whatever belongs to the primary, they will have .mdf.
Yes. No, no, no,
There is a
not like that. Not like that. Not like
oh,
that. Okay. So
mm.
only one MDF file will be there per database.
Okay,
The first data file. Okay. Only one MDF file will be there per database.
okay,
Okay. Multiple data files will be there. Not multiple
okay,
MDF files. Multiple data files will be there, but the first file will be MDF. Remaining all other files are NDF. Don't think the files what are going to be added in the primary file group are .mdf.
okay,
Okay, only one file that is there in the primary file group will be .mdf. If you add one more file, that will be .ndf only, even though you are adding in the primary file group.
okay,
Okay, if you want to see here, just this is the files, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add one more file here. Okay, this you can see, this is my data file and this is my log file. And if you see the extension of the each file, .mdf, .ldf, right? So let me add you one more file for this database. Just click on add button. There you can see a new file is added. Okay, what I'll do, evening batch file 2. Okay, now if you go and check the extension of this file, right, you can see, of course you cannot see now. Okay, let me click OK. Right, now go to the location of this file group, properties, file space. Okay, so here this is the location of the path. Copy it, open, run, paste it, enter. There you can see. Okay, this is the MDF file. Okay, and I'll show you. All you can see data file only. See here, this is primary data file and this is secondary data file. And if you see the extension also, go to properties, and if you see, it belongs to .ndf. Okay, so only one MDF file will be there. Okay, in a database, only one MDF file will be there in a database. Don't think the files that are going to be added in the primary file group, all files are MDF files. Not all files are MDF file, only one MDF file will be there. Remaining all are secondary data files only, all are NDF files only.
okay. I got your point. You were trying to say that per database we will have only one MDF file, one and LDF files, and remaining all files will be of the .ndf extension.
If you want, you can add, okay, multiple log files also, but you cannot create multiple MDF files. Okay,
Okay,
you can create multiple data files, multiple log files, but you cannot create multiple MDF files. Only one MDF
okay.
file will be there per database. Multiple NDF files, multiple log files also can be there.
Mm-hmm. So the data will go in MDF and NDF, and the log entry will be happen in the log files.
Yes, yes, entry will be
Okay,
happen in the log files, but I'll tell you how log file will work. That is a different
okay.
architecture and all. Now you got the
I got your
point,
point.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
how data will go, where data will go depends upon the default option you have chosen in the file groups. Okay, if you chosen your MDF file, then the data will be goes to, if you choose primary file group, then your data will goes to MDF file or the files that are there in the primary file group. If you choose different file group, what are the files are there in that file group, the data will goes to that particular files and all.
Okay, got it.
Get
And
it?
see,
Yeah.
there is also a concept of partition database, which in which this MDF and NDF have a great amount of role.
Okay. So usually we can do one more thing also. So if you want to, while creating the objects, you can mention on what file I want to create this object and also. For example, you are creating one table. While creating itself, if you want, you can mention in the MDF file, or else if you want, you can mention any of the file groups. If you are specifically mentioning the location, then it will sit there. If you don't mention any location and all, usually it will use default option.
Okay.
Got it? So for example, you are creating a employee table. You want this table to be created on the file 2. Then you can mention in the query where it has to be created. Or else if you don't mention anything in the query, then it will be created in the default file group. Got it?
Yeah, got it.
Yeah. So like this it is going to be okay. Created that MDF files, NDF files and all. And of course, okay, usually in the databases, file groups and log files will be there. In that, your files will be there. MDF files and NDF files will be there. These are the data files, right? So you can create 32,767 file groups per database and all. And of course, in the file groups, you will have MDF files and NDF files. How to create MDF files and NDF files? Simply go to the primary file groups or else go to the database properties. There you can see, okay, files and all. There you can add how many files you want. You can simply add, just click on add button. Like this you can create 32,767 files per file group and all. Okay, so this is the discussion on the files and file groups. Any doubts on files and file groups, just let me know. The default file group is primary file groups, and you can create multiple file groups based on the okay client requirement and all. Clear? Any doubts, any issues? Right. So database file groups, database objects and files can be grouped together into file groups for allocation and administration purpose and all. File group is a collection of data files. Every database will support 32,767 file groups. When we create database, primary file group will automatically create, so we can create 32,766 file groups. Primary file group will contain MDF files and NDF files and all. Okay. Right, I'll discuss this one later. So whenever the file is going to be full, if your data file is full, usually what happened is you will get 1105. So file is also unlimited, right? So if you go here, what is the size of this file usually? Okay, let me go to the properties. Okay, so if you go here, maybe the size of this file, any of the MDF file is like around, okay, now it is 3 MB. Okay, so of course we just enabled the auto growth, so it will grow how much free space is there in the C drive. Imagine I have 11 GB free space, okay, 10 GB free space. Till the whole free space is going to be consumed, the data file is going to be grow. Once the free space is consumed, then of course you will get a data file full error. Okay, what is that error number? 1105. If your data file is full, you will get 1105 error. Sometimes in the interviews they will ask what is 1105 error, what is 9002 error. If your data file, you will get 1105 error, and if your log file is full, you will get 9002 error. Okay, 9002 error and all. Right, fine. So we have two types of transaction. So what is meant by transaction? First of all, what is meant by transaction? So transaction, you know, right, earlier while creating the tables and all, we just write some queries. Okay, so we have two types of transactions. Two types of transactions. What are those two types? Implicit transaction, okay, and explicit transaction. So remember one thing, okay, whenever you are inserting any values, you are writing some insert queries. You are writing some insert queries. Insert into table name, something like employee table, okay, one comma, the table name, employee name is something around Suresh, okay, and right, two columns are there, so you are inserting. So what is this transaction called? You just gave like this. Okay, so what is this transaction called? Is it a implicit transaction or explicit transaction? Anyone, any idea? What is this transaction called? Implicit or explicit? Right, so remember one thing here, for every transaction there is a full query. What is that query? Begin tran. Okay, and finally you will have commit. Okay, for every query you will have begin tran and commit. For every each and every query you will have begin tran and commit. So usually while inserting the records you will not give begin tran and commit. You will not give begin tran and commit. You will simply give like this. Okay, so these kind of transactions are implicit transaction, but without giving begin tran and commit it is not possible. Okay, you have to give begin tran and commit, then only your SQL server will execute the transaction. Okay, but you are not giving the transaction, still SQL server is executing this query successfully. How means your SQL server is adding these default values to each and every transaction. Okay, so if you find any transaction like this without having your begin tran and commit, those transactions are called implicit transactions. But remember one thing, SQL server will add begin tran and commit commands to each transaction. Commit means it will permanently save it to the data file. What is meant by commit? Commit means the transaction will be committed permanently. So your transaction, that record will be saved to the data file permanently, to the disk permanently. Okay, so if you are not giving begin tran and commit, all the transactions, if you give transaction like this, SQL server will add begin tran and commit by default. So implicit transactions are auto committed transactions. Implicit transactions are auto committed transaction. Why? Because SQL server is automatically, it is adding commit query at the end of that particular query and all. SQL server is adding commit command at the end of each query. So if you want to, okay, if you don't want to give commit also, commit and all, what you have to do is, if you just create simply an implicit transaction, you just write the query like this, those transactions will be treated as implicit transactions and all. Implicit transactions are auto committed transaction. Why? Because SQL server will provide commit here. If you don't want to create implicit transactions, okay, if you don't want to commit transactions automatically, you want to commit it manually, then what you can do is, you can simply create explicit transactions. What is this explicit transactions and all? If you have just started the transaction with begin tran, and if you are not providing, see, if you just started by just typing begin tran and you just gave insert query, okay, if you are not giving commit, it will not commit. Okay, SQL server will not add commit. If you don't give begin tran and commit, then only SQL server will add begin tran and commit. But if you manually give begin tran, but if you are not giving commit, the transaction will not be committed lifelong. You have to give commit. If you are manually giving begin tran, you have to manually give commit also. If you are not giving begin tran and commit, SQL server will add you begin tran and commit. So implicit transactions are auto committed transactions, whereas explicit transactions, these kind of transactions we are going to call it as explicit transactions. You have to explicitly provide the begin tran and commit parameters. Explicit transactions are not auto committed transactions. Okay, only implicit transactions are auto committed transactions. So what is meant by implicit transaction? SQL server will add begin tran and commit for each transactions. Those transactions are implicit transaction. By default each transaction is a implicit transaction only. All transactions are implicit transactions only. If you don't want implicit, if you want explicit, if you want explicitly provide the commit begin tran and all, you have to give begin tran and you have to close by using commit query, then only the transaction will be committed permanently. Otherwise, if you start with begin tran, if you don't provide commit, those transactions are not going to be committed permanently. Any doubts, any issues? Okay, fine, right. So let me go. Okay, let me check this one. Implicit transactions, no need to give starting and ending statements. SQL OS itself will give those commands as below: begin tran and commit. Explicit transactions, we have to explicitly give the begin trend and commit statements. Okay, we can roll back the explicit transaction, whereas we cannot do in the implicit transactions. If the transactions are uncommitted transactions, if the transactions are not committed, you can cancel those transactions. Rollback means what? Undo. You can undo those transactions. If the transactions are committed, you cannot undo. Why? Because those are permanently saved to the disk. If you want to cancel, it's not possible. You can only delete the transactions. You can only delete the records, but you cannot roll back the transactions in the implicit transactions. Whereas explicit transactions, as the transactions are not committed, you can roll back the explicit transactions and all. You cannot roll back the implicit transactions. Right? Clear? Any issues? Any doubts? Right. Okay, fine. So we'll go a little bit inside. Okay, we'll discuss about the page as discussed in the SQL Server. Databases will be there in the databases. File groups and log files will be there in the log files. Okay, your sorry, in the data files, your extents will be there. In the extents and all your data pages will be there. We'll go inside the page. What will be there inside the page? How it is going to manage the storage and all. Okay, so if you go here, if you see here, this is your page architecture. This is your 8 KB page architecture and all. Data page. Pages means data pages only. In the log file, there is no page concept. Log file will work differently. Pages means only data pages. Okay, so this is the architecture of the data page. How it will work? This is the page header section. In the page header section, it will store the page number, page ID, which database it belongs to, what is the object ID and all. It will store in the page header section. Okay, page header will use, of course it is storing some data, right? What is the size of the page? What is the size of the page? 8192 bytes. 8 KB means what? 8192 bytes, right? So the size of the page is 8 KB, which is 8192 bytes. 1024 into 8, you will get 8192 bytes. Okay, here page header will store metadata of the page. Page header will store metadata of the page. What is the metadata of the page? Page number, page ID, object ID, and that page related information and all will be stored in the page header. Okay, then this is the body of the page where the data is going to be stored. And of course, at the end of the page, you can find a row offset. At the end of the page, you can find row offset. Row offset is kind of index. Okay, you know, right? Book index. In the book index page, first page or second page, you will find the index page. In that index page, you can find which topic, which page number and all. What is the page number of each topic? You can easily go to the topic by using that index page. Okay, there you can see the page numbers and all. In the same way, this row offset is a table which stores address of the each record. This is your record. Okay, this one is one record. This is, imagine I just inserted three records. Employee number one, and employee name is Suresh, and the second employee name is Ramesh, and third employee name is something like Mahesh. So this is your Suresh record, this is Mahesh record, and this is your Ramesh record and all. Okay, these are the records, and this row offset will store, of course, record is going to be stored in some location, right? That address is going to be stored in the row offset section. Each record address will be stored in the row offset section. Okay, so row offset is storing something and page header is also storing something. Page header will use, okay, 96 bytes. In each page header will use 96 bytes. Row offset will use 36 bytes. Okay, row offset will use 36 bytes. Total how much? 96 plus 36.
140. So
Okay,
20.
one. How much is that? What is the 96 into?
132.
Yeah, okay. So 132 bytes, total is 132 bytes. So if you see 8192 bytes minus, okay, 132 bytes, okay, how much you'll get? 80.
162. 816. Sorry, 806.
8060.
Okay, so you'll get a 8060 bytes. Okay, so in each page you are storing 8060 bytes of data. Got it? In each page you are storing. Why? Because in each page you will have page header, in each page you will have row offset. Okay, so page header 96 bytes and your row offset is 36 bytes, total is 132 bytes. Okay, so this 132 bytes will be used to store the metadata. Okay, so if you subtract 132 bytes minus total page size, okay, you will get 8060 bytes. In each page, how much space you are using exactly? 8060. Maximum you can use 8060 bytes. In each page, you can use a maximum storage of 8060 bytes. Once if it was 8060 bytes was occupied, then SQL Server will allocate one more page for the table. But its SQL Server will allocate one more new page, okay, to the table and all. From where you are getting the pages? You are getting it from the extents. Where the extents are there? Extents are there in the files. Where the files will be there? Files are there in the file groups. Okay, right. So in each page you can use 8060 bytes and all. You can say I just mentioned the same here. Okay, 8060 bytes. So we can save 8060 bytes of data in every page. Page cannot share for multiple tables. We have already discussed this point. We cannot share the page for multiple object. Remember one thing, object and table both are same. Usually in SQL Server, we are going to call everything as objects only. Tables will call it as objects. Stored procedures will call it as objects. Views will call it as objects. Security related kind of this users and all will call it as objects. Databases also objects. Okay, so here as per the instance, okay, here objects means tables. We can create only one table per page. If the table is big, SQL Server will allocate one more page. Table cannot be, table can use multiple pages, okay, but a single page cannot be shared by multiple tables. A single table can be shared by multiple pages. A single table can be shared by multiple pages, but a single page cannot be shared by multiple tables. One page, one table only. If that is not sufficient, SQL Server will allocate one more page. Like that, it is going to allocate. It is keep on allocating the pages and all. If that sometimes table size is 2 terabytes, 3 terabytes and all. Imagine how many pages it will allocate. How many pages it will allocate to the database and all. Right? SQL Server database have 128 pages per MB. 1 MB 1024 divided by how much?
128.
128, not 128. Okay, 1024 MB by, sorry, 1024 KB by 8 KB. 1 MB is equal to 1024 KB, right?
Yes.
Okay, so 1 MB is equal to 1024 KB divided by what is the page size? 8 KB. You will get 128 pages per MB. 1 MB, okay, for 1 MB you will get 128 pages. Like that, if the database size is 2 MB, you will have 128 into 2. If it is 1 GB, you can easily understand, you can easily calculate and all. Each page begins with 96 byte header that is used to store system information about the page. The information includes the page number, page type, the amount of free space, how much free space is there in that particular page, and also will be tracked in the page header section, and the allocation unit ID of the object that owns the page. What it means? The allocation unit, can anyone tell me what it means? The allocation unit ID of the object that owns the page. What it means? What is the allocation unit ID of the object that owns the page? What it means exactly? Means that is a table ID. In the page, what object we can store? Only tables, right? Of course, table stored procs and all. So that table ID or else whatever object you are creating, that object ID will be stored in that particular page name, page header section and all. Right? So any doubts, any issues till now? Let me know if you have any doubts and all. Okay. Just take 5 minutes break. Again, we are going to start. Okay. We are going to resume the classes.
So that can we start a new session? This session also going to end.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, no problem, no problem. I'll open a new session. Okay.
After a break.
Yeah, after break.
Okay.
Right, let me close and reopen the session. Okay.